Hi, how are you? I'm Mike Kraft. They used to call me Big Mike or Con. I'm the former boss of the Lansky Group in the Northern Territories of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and the eastern part of Quebec. I surrendered to the United States Treasury Department on November 2nd, 1987. And this is my new bar. I'm now going to start back in the rackets. The government held me for 17 years. I didn't give them a thing. Nobody ever went to jail because I talked. A friend of mine who was actually the original agent for the Casino movie, Stephen Vickers, was the one that brought me into the program. But they agreed to pay me millions of dollars to do high-level tax cases. And then they gave me nothing. They wanted me to turn over all my friends and associates, and I refused. So turning myself into the government basically broke me, broke my family, and ruined my life. It ruined nobody else's life. I still have kept my mouth shut, and I will never use any of the names. But Meyer Lansky liked me. All my associates loved me. And I became the youngest boss in the country at the age of 34. So in the next few minutes, we're going to be showing you the bar and saying hello and meeting some people and telling a few stories. So I want you to sit back and enjoy yourself. Because no matter what show you catch, I'm the only real deal that you're ever going to talk to on national television. I was a syndicate member and still am for 36 years. And unlike other people, that you see their names up in lights, I never gave up anybody. And that's how we're going to proceed on the making of a new organized crime family. Come on into Mike's bar. I'm going to have a few drinks and see some friends. I'm waiting for my underboss now. I'll talk to you.
Mike, you're a pain in the ass. You're supposed to meet me for lunch. You didn't show up.
That's Rachel. 19 years old, sophomore at CW Post, and she gives me more shit than my ex-wife. But she's going to work for me. She's going to run this bar and two others because she's smart. Something came up, Rachel. I mean, I told you there's a big age difference between us. We're friends, and I'm also friends with your parents. Now, your mother's sitting over here drinking me out of house and home. She might not want you with a guy this age, you know?
That doesn't matter. I'm an adult.
Let's sit down, let's talk. Adam, will you do me a favor and bring me a drink, please? You know, setting up a new bar, this isn't like Rocco's 22. You know, these are saloons, you know? We got 8 of these tables and 4 chairs that cost me $150 a piece around them. We got nice furniture. A plain tile floor. We've still got a cigarette machine, a big screen television, and a jukebox. And that's it. We're going to try with lunches and everything to make $1,000 a day, of which I don't want you ringing up more than half, because I need that other $500 to live on. But if this is what you're going to do, Adam, you two get along. But Adam, look at Klein didn't show up. You think he's? I don't think he wants the life. This is Adam. He's my bartender here at Mike's Bar. He's a good guy, but he wants to be a gangster, not just a bar manager. So Rachel's going to run the bar. He's got to take all the football sheets between here and Binghamton. And let me tell you something. That's one big job. There's nobody going to buck him because there's no organization strong enough to buck him. They're all little independents. We will be taking over Binghamton, the Johnson City area, Oneonta, and your lovely Cooperstown, which I love and cherish all my life. We handle all the football and basketball sheets. And you'll be drinking in our bars, too. You're going to be able to handle this action in Binghamton.
Sure.
This is a different kind of gambling. I did it years ago with Baki Cassidy. I didn't like it myself. Then I opened up a bunch of bars and had the theft rings. Theft was my main business. I need the football sheets, I need the basketball sheets, and we're going to start the baseball sheets. Nobody handles baseball. The odds are so big in our favor that we can't lose. And people love this because for $2 or $3, they can feel like they're betting thousands of dollars. Right? But that's why we have to distribute 50, 60,000 cards. So everybody's getting commission. They get 20% commission on their bulk sales, okay, to all the runners. You're going to be in charge of a lot of runners.
Okay.
Can you handle it?
Sure.
You're going to take you may take an arrest from the Organized Crime Task Force. I'm telling you right now.
That's okay.
Okay, Frank Adams and those guys, you know, they run a clean show, but so do we. All right?
Okay.
All right, welcome.
Thank you.
Now get behind the bar, because somebody's got to work. I don't. Hey, Joe, what's up?
How you doing?
How are you? Rachel, this is Joe Condon. He owns Radio Albany.
Hey, Rachel. Nice meeting you.
What
How you doing?
How are you?
You guys have a nice Thanksgiving?
Oh, yeah.
What'd you do?
Just family and friends, you know. The kids
great.
were with their mother, and now that I'm divorced, it's back in the bar business. You got to have an ulterior motive for being here on an off day.
Well, it's good to see you folks on Thanksgiving weekend. It's always great to see friends and get caught up on you. I'm getting the impression that you're willing to talk about some of the things that have been going on in the earlier part of your life.
Well, is this on the record or off the record?
Whatever you want it to be.
Well, if it's going to be on the record, I'm going to be very specific.
Okay, let's be specific.
All right. Have you got your tape recorder running?
It's running.
Okay. Well, the Treasury Department got me in '87 for the always available income tax evasion and interstate racketeering.
And how did you get yourself into that position with the Treasury Department?
Well, the Justice Department was about ready to grab me because my guys had moved to drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I personally never...
What guys?
Some of my crew, the guys that were working for me.
Okay.
And I had a young family, and my wife was suing me for divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids needed me, and my parents were elderly, and I'd already been in 20 years. I made millions of dollars and always was broke.
Why?
I'm a degenerate gambler, you know, terrible degenerate gambler. You know, I always half drunk and betting millions of dollars a year. I had a ton. My liquor file is this thick with all the bars and restaurants I owned, and I never made a dime because I was always, the monkey of my life is a bookmaker, you know. He's a John that you carry around in your shoulder, you know. As long as there's a phone available somewhere, because my credit was good, you know. Even though I was boss of my own organization, you got to bet with somebody. You can't bet with yourself. So I was a victim.
Rachel, I've heard that, maybe you can share this with us, that not only for yourself but others, gambling is as addictive as having a drinking problem.
Probably more so. When you drink too much booze, you fall down and go to sleep. You take too much narcotics, you die.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you have money, you can never gamble enough. It's not only physically debilitating in depression, it's mentally debilitating because you're always on the come. You're always on the make. I could drop 100 names right now, people that are known in the newspapers. You know, from Frank Sinatra on down, they became victims. And
Well, you said this is what got you in trouble with the federal government, and you were approached.
well, I was approached by a friend of mine, and it's a funny story. If you got a couple minutes, and
Sure.
Steve Vickers was an agent for the Secret Service at one time in Las Vegas. He's actually the actual agent who set up Spilatro in the real-life casino, which they made a movie out of with Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci. Steve was an undercover croupier in Las Vegas. They kept him under too long. He lost his wife, his children, his home. But we went to school together, and my name started to surface in the 70s because Meyer Lansky liked me.
In Vegas.
Yeah, I was going out to see Mo Dallas at the Desert Inn once in a while. And I was a young guy, everybody liked me, you know. I wasn't from a violent past. You know, my father was a civil servant, my mother was former head of a hospital. You know, I had some college. I was a nice guy. But because my father had fixed a few trials for some guys, he was, in the days when they didn't have clerks in the court, he was the stenographer, and he had to check all the evidence in. You could talk to my father, as they say. And he did a favor for a big-time racket guy, Johnny Diaguardi, Johnny Dio. So Dio, to pay me back, hooked me up with Meyer Lansky, unbeknownst to me, through Doc Ferrone, a guy you know from Saratoga Springs. And Doc, I used to run some money for Doc, and I take payments over to Ray Patriarca in Providence, Rhode Island. I wouldn't go to Boston. And Patriarca was still doing business with the Kennedys. You know, Joe, the old man was gone, but people forgot that the guy that brought me in, Doc Ferrone, was Joe Kennedy's partner. You know, I'm like a figure of history, and just a few people are starting to find out about it. But I kept my mouth shut for 17 years. The government refused to pay me after the first payment because I wouldn't rat anybody out.
Why do you want to talk now?
Because the FBI and the Justice Department stuck their nose in the Treasury Department business and committed a lot of crimes around me. They refused to make arrests, they fixed trials, and I became what is called in the law the prima facie witness. But because I'm short of cash, they kept threatening me with RICO prosecution until I got good lawyers. And they say, Mikey, what are you hanging around? They can't hold you forever. So after 10 years, I finally smartened up, and I've been fighting them for 7 years. But, you know, I have liquor licenses, and I
In
don't...
17 years, that's a lot of different heads of the Justice Department. They've all had
all the same.
They've all had the same position towards you.
All the same position.
Why?
Because they don't have me. They don't have me for murder. They don't have me for any crimes other than the ones I was brought in from, which were white-collar crimes.
Your being in the restaurant business and your previous career, how did the two end up intersecting?
Well, the bar business is how I started out. I started out in New York from a guy from New York City called Lou Trentine. Lou came up to upstate Albany, New York, and he bought a joint called Barone's Inn, which became the Frat House. Now, as you know, I bought the Frat House in my 20s. I was working the bars, but I was working a theft ring all up and down the Northway. I personally bankrupted Fay's department stores, and I personally bankrupted all the Ward stores. I mean, because of my buddy Paul DeCoco, who ran the Teamsters Union, we actually ran him. So when drivers would see me pull up to a warehouse and get out of a car with a couple of guys, they knew I was going to take their truck for a ride. My main business was hijacking, but we did it politely. Nobody got hurt. We cut in the drivers for a full 20%. Okay. And we didn't take everything off the truck. The key there, nobody ever knew where it was being dumped. Okay? He reported it. The dock foreman would report it. But then we got even smarter. Montgomery Wards had no security. This is basically why they went bankrupt. This is prior to Mobil Oil buying them. But Mobil Oil didn't have any security either. And then they tried to swindle all the employees in Montgomery Wards. They took the pension fund and invested into the stores to bail it out. But all the warehouses, there was no invoices. I mean, it's like you could sell 100 refrigerators, and they kept restocking. So I can remember when Doc Ferrone picked me up in 1968, I told him, I says, I'm going to work at this warehouse. I'm cleaning it out of tires. He says, well, I had something better for you, Mike. I was already robbing. I was working for Lou Trentine at night. I took a part-time job right here in Albany at Steiner's warehouse. And I was cleaning them out.
Where'd you go to school?
Colony, local high school.
When you graduated, a lot of people considered the military as a career. This was during the Vietnam War period. Obviously, other people went to work for the state or the government. Some people continued their education. What made you decide to pursue a life of crime?
I didn't consider it a life of crime. I was just into it for the money. You know, my father gave me the protection of the courts. I couldn't be convicted of anything. He controlled all the judges. My Uncle Frank was the bag man for Dan O'Connell, so the Albany police...
Frank who?
Frank Pryor.
All right.
Your son's a cop in the Albany Police Department. This is the old days when it was all... You know the stories, and they're all true. More so than people would like to know. But Dan O'Connell, as I got into the rackets with Meyer, really originally worked for Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano back in the 30s. And he had all the gambling from here to Syracuse and down to Poughkeepsie at one time. You know, people in Albany didn't realize that although he was their county Democratic chairman, he ran all the gambling and all the vice. period. But he had to kick in up until 1953. He had the gambling out to Herkimer, out to Utica, down to Poughkeepsie, almost out to Binghamton, because it was supported by the guys in New York and Florida. But he refused to go to prison to see Meyer Lansky. Meyer got popped and took a lousy 90 days in Ballston Spa Penitentiary for all the gambling casinos. Remember that when we were kids? My father used to tell me stories about that. But he took 90 days because he owned the sheriff and he owned the warden, and 90 days in Ballston Spa Penitentiary in Saratoga, New York. That took care of all the casinos and all the problems for life. But he ordered Dan O'Connell up to see him. Dan refused to go to pay his respects. Now, I know this firsthand, even though I was only 5 years old. The day Meyer got out of jail, he was picked up by my lifelong friend, Paul DeCoco. And Paul was assigned to be his in-prison bodyguard. Paul went to jail every day as a job. They let him in, go in to see Meyer, take the bets, it was in the summertime, over to the track, talk to him, be his friend. So when he got out of jail, Paul was there with Carmen Galante, who was a capo in the Bonanno family. And they were partners. Dan never came to see Meyer, didn't show respect. So Meyer called Albert Anastasia in New York and said, Albert, remove everything that Dan owns. And so Albert gave Dan the word, you're losing everything but that little county you're in, Albany County. You can keep that. That's it. Any complaints? Well, I don't want to be specific, but you know Albert Anastasia's reputation from the books. He would have killed everybody.
Rachel was saying earlier, before we started going on record, that she wondered if there was some connection with this and the kidnapping of Dan O'Connell's son.
Oh yeah, that was done by Luciano. Everybody always blames...
You were right.
Yeah, everybody always blames Legs Diamond and those guys. Solly O'Connell was the guy.
It was punishment.
It was punished. To keep them in line. The Italian boys from New York City who actually controlled... Meyer was very, it was the old combination. That's how it started. Back with Lucky Luciano in April 1931 they started. Dan was a member of that group.
And Rachel's other question was, what was their tie-in with Hedrick Brewing Company?
That was Dan O'Connell's brewing company.
I know.
He owned Dobler too. He sold beer all over. And when my uncle got out of ninth grade, he went to the ninth grade. He was 6'9". He couldn't get a job, and he high school dropout. I mean, where's he going to go? Of course, he's going to be an Albany policeman. And Tony Dean, the name upstate New York, who was the inspector of police, took Frank as his driver because he was so big. Frank eventually, 30 years later, became inspector of police. But see, inspector of police in Albany was different than they say on TV. The inspector was chief of detectives, and it ran the gambling squad. And Frank shook down everybody. After he collected for the Democratic Party, he collected for himself. I mean, he had a house in Scottsdale, Arizona, Orlando, Florida, and Gilliland, New York, on a $25,000 or $30,000 a year paycheck. So I asked him one day, I said, hey, Frank, you're doing pretty good, all these houses. I said, you must have got a big pay raise, that new Cadillac Brougham you're driving. He said, money management, my boy, money management. And he started to laugh, because if you wanted to keep your bar open, you paid him $100 a week. If you wanted to run a card game, it was $200 a week.
Why do you feel the federal government let you down?
Well, they made promises to me that I would not have to give up anybody. They knew I was boss in the eastern part of Canada, okay? And the reason I took that, because my mother's from Canada, and I had lived in Canada all my life. Who else was Meyer going to get when he was dying? Okay? It isn't the fact that Meyer had any pull up there. I really use the name. You've got to belong to an organization if you're anything in this country. So I was a Lansky. That gave me a lot of leeway. What I never even told the newspaper when they did a big story on me, I was a good friend of Ralph Capone's, Al Capone's brother, down in Palm Island, because a partner of mine was Ralph Carpenter in Gilliland, New York. His real name was Rudolfo Carpentieri, and he was Al Capone's first cousin. So I met Ralph Capone down in Palm Island.
What do you hope to gain by finally talking?
Well, I've kept my mouth shut and saved everybody's ass. And I have a book coming out. There's been some discussion with Universal about a movie of the week based upon my crew. See, I'm a non-Italian boss. Okay, the entire crime in the United States, the Italians who I respect have about 5 or 6% of it. There's a lot of Irish guys, There's the Russians are big time, the Chinese. The Italians are into everything, but they're very clannish, and that's hurting them now. Whereas, see, we in the syndicate, just like the outfit in the Midwest, we're multi-denominational, as it were. We're like a Unitarian church. You know, we're like the Elks Club with guns. You know, I always say that. You know, we don't go through the ritual of the holding the little card in your hand and burning it and all that. We go to a dinner when you're accepted for membership. Anybody that wants to complain about you can complain, and you're out.
Syndicate, that's a word that people hear on television, on the radio, but it's probably a word that a lot of people really don't know what the definition is. What's your definition of the word?
A syndicate is a group of businesses locked in together to have one purpose. That's basically what a syndicate is. It's a conglomerate.
And the syndicate you were in, its purpose was to make money.
Make money, not
But
kill
how?
people. Any way you could. Basically, we made money. I made money in theft. All right? Certain people make money in narcotics. Certain people make money in labor racketeering. I mean, if this goes a little too far, we shook down some actors. We shook down a couple big movies,
Who?
award-winning movies. We shook down Barbara Streisand and Robert Redford when they did The Way We Were. Paul DiCoco shook them down. And like Paul,
What made them vulnerable?
because Paul controlled the Teamsters union. Now Paul looked at me, and we were both general members. Okay, we're not some flunky associate. We were taken in as members, both of us with Meyer Lansky, but he had Carmen Galanti also, who at the time was somebody in the Italians. All right? But they were easy to shake down. I mean, you take a movie like The Way We Were. They shot it in Schenectady, New York, on Union College.
Right.
You go on, the Teamsters control all the sound equipment, all the camera equipment, all the grips, all the wardrobe people. Everything's a team. Everybody has to be a Teamster. So Paul sat down with the producers, and I forget the names. And he said, I want us all to have a very profitable movie. And I said, well, that's why we came here, Mr. DeCoco. He said, no, call me Paul. He said, I will call you Mr. So-and-so. He liked to keep everybody in their